right, let's open our Bibles to Isaiah chapter 34 this morning. Isaiah 34. As we are working our way through the book of Isaiah, verse by verse, we have talked about recently, and it's going back now 3 weeks, in chapter 32, Isaiah talked about justice, and we talked about the idea of biblical justice. Well, today we're going to see what that justice looks like. Okay? We're going to see the retribution that God brings to a wicked, wicked world. And these images are going to seem harsh, but I think part of it is we have grown up in this post-Christian culture, which means a culture that was entrenched in Christianity, grabbed some of the morals of it, and then kind of went beyond it and said, we'll keep going with some of the ideas, but we'll toss the ideas we don't like. And some of the ideas that we do like are the ideas of you shouldn't try to get anyone back. Nobody should face real harsh penalties for what they have done wrong. Okay? That's kind of entrenched in our culture now, because we understand the concept of we shouldn't take out vindication on people. And in a sense, there is a truth to that, right? God says, don't take vengeance. But do you know why God tells the Christian believer to not take vengeance? Because he is going to do it, right? It's not that God is some God that just wipes away anything you've done wrong, no matter what, and just offers amnesty to everyone. Okay, he offers it, but it comes at a great cost. It is the cost of his Son, and punishment being borne on his Son. And you must receive that and believe that, and if you don't, the punishment still remains on you. So the retribution is taken out on you if you do not accept God's means of removal of punishment. Okay? Because God is a just God. He is not a God that just lets things go on that go against his law of what is right and what helps humanity thrive. So I think in our post-Christian culture, texts like Isaiah 34 need to be preached because we struggle with kind of the yucky parts of the Bible, right? And that's a theological term, the yucky parts of the Bible. I'm afraid also we live in such a comfortable culture that is so isolated from death. We don't really have it right in our face, so we don't want a kind of solving of that problem. If you were to watch your family murdered in front of you, you would have a kind of lust for blood and for vengeance. And it would be right, okay? If you have those traumatic images in your mind ingrained of watching people you love, their body parts, blood coming out, and I'm sorry to be graphic, but this happens in real life, people. And Isaiah 34 addresses it and says, God will take to task those who have done murderous things. Not just things that are literally murder, but things that lead to murder, things that lead to human depravity. God will take it to task, and that's what the imagery of Isaiah 34 is all about. So buckle in. This is a harsh chapter. And, I hear sometimes from old school guys, usually they're guys like me with crow's feet and beards who are older and grumpy. They say, nobody these days wants to preach on hell or judgment. Well, you don't get to say that, all right? Here today, I'm now preaching on that, all right? So don't ever say Pastor Elijah never preached on hell and judgment and all that. He only preached nice things. Here it is, all right? So buckle up. Isaiah 34. Let me start by reading verses 1 to 2. Come near, you nations, to hear, and heed, or listen up, you people. Let the earth hear, and all that is in it, the world and all things that come forth from it. For the indignation of the Lord is against all nations, and his fury against all their armies. He has utterly destroyed them. He has given them over to the slaughter. So today we are talking about the slaughter that is coming through God judging the wickedness that is found in humanity. So we see this beginning part here. We have the nations standing trial. Did you notice how many different ways he said everybody? Okay, let me point it out to you. And this is, again, in typical Hebrew poetic form, where you have one line and then you say the next line that is kind of an intensification of the first line. You heard that as we were reading through Proverbs this morning in our scripture reading, where you say something and then you sharpen that concept, then you say it and say it again in this parallelistic form. Listen to how Isaiah does that. And he is probably the master poet of the Bible. Come near, you nations, to hear, and heed, you people. Okay, so think about the parallelism. Coming near to hear and heeding, so that's more than just hearing it, like taking it in. It's heeding it, it's listening to it and obeying it. And then it's not just the nations, but the peoples. Okay, nations have to do with ethnic boundaries, geographic boundaries. People, the distinction there is more who your blood related to. And often, though, this word people, it's the word found in Psalm 2, why do the nations rage and the people imagine a vain thing? So those two words are held in parallel in Psalm 2. They're held in parallel here together as well. And they also identify a people of one blood who come together as armies against each other. So it's saying, come near, all you people, all you nations, and listen up, all you armies that are gathered together. Let the earth hear. So now we have a threefer. Usually it's just a twofer in Hebrew parallelism. This is a threefer. Let all the earth hear, and all that is in it, the world and all things that come forth from it. Okay, so it's a fourfer. The world and the earth and all. So who is to listen to the message of Isaiah 34? Everyone. All right, this message is saying everyone. And it sets it up as kind of a trial. So we see all the nations of the world are defendants in this trial. That's what we see is going on here. God does this often in the prophets. He puts, usually it's Israel, on trial because they have broken his laws. Well, right now he's putting the whole world on trial. Okay? And this goes back to chapter 28, which said, you have broken the covenant. And what covenant would that be but the covenant of Noah? The covenant that man is made in the image of God, so you shouldn't be killing him. And if you kill, your life should be taken because man is made in the image of God. That's just kind of the basis of all of human laws, and natural law is the idea that you don't kill humanity. You do that which helps humanity live. All law flows out of that. And that has been established since the time of Noah. Theologians often describe Noah as the one who established human government, actually. The idea that the image of God is on humanity, so don't you dare make that image go away. So we base laws off of that. Not just laws of murder, but all kinds of other laws that contribute to the thriving of humanity. So God is calling the nations together because they've broken his law. And here's now, we have some emotional language of the Lord. For the indignation of the Lord is against which nations? All nations. And his fury is against all their armies. He has utterly destroyed them. He's given them over to the slaughter. So here is the sentence that's pronounced against the nations. The sentence pronounced against the nations is a bloody slaughter. So God is not just saying, you have broken my law, so you have a fine to pay. He's saying, you have broken my law, so you deserve death. And not just a humane death where you get a lethal injection, a bloody slaughter. That is what is deserved when you go against the Lord of the universe who made you to serve him. How dare we think we can live against what God has done? So he says every nation of the world is going to face this slaughter. If you remember, as we've studied Isaiah, he has picked on so many nations, right? He's picked on Assyria and Egypt and Ethiopia and Moab and a lot of them, Babylon, Tyre. If you can come up with some more, shout them out. Okay, that's no more. Thank you. But he's picked on a lot of them, right? And here he says, actually it's the whole earth. And that's who is going to face this judgment. Now here is what that slaughter looks like. It's so harsh. Verse 3, also their slain shall be thrown out. The stench shall rise up from their corpses, and the mountain shall be melted with their blood. And the host of heaven shall be dissolved, the heaven shall be rolled up like a scroll, and their host shall fall down, and the leaf falls from the vine, and the fruit from falling from a fig tree. For my sword shall be bathed in heaven, indeed it shall come down in Edom, and on the people of my curse for judgment. The sword of the Lord is filled with blood, it has made overflowing with it. It is made overflowing with fatness, with the blood of lambs and goats, with the fat of the kidneys of rams. For the Lord has a sacrifice in Bozrah, and a great slaughter in the land of Eden. The wild oxen shall come down with them, and the young bulls with the mighty bulls. Their land shall be soaked with blood, and their dust saturated with fatness. And this is what is coming in the future. So let me show you the different images of judgment that we find within this text. The first image you find is in the first few verses there, verses 3 and following. Look at verse 3 again. Also their slain will be thrown out, the stench will rise up from their corpses, the mountain shall be melted with their blood. The picture there is that there's so much blood, this is hyperbole, but there's so much blood of God judging the world, it reaches up to the mountains. That's how deep the blood is. Okay, I don't know if you've ever seen anything with quite this depth. I can't even come close to it. The closest I can comprehend is, do you remember, it was several years ago, what year were the floods in Owego? Does anyone remember that? Owego faced horrendous floods. It was over 10 years ago. 2011, okay? 2011, Owego had flooding that was horrendous, the Susquehanna down there. And if you drove down to Owego, go down Route 96, and you'd look in certain places, there were trees with mud lines, knowing that the floodwaters went as high as trees, And it's just so hard to comprehend that, I wasn't there at the time. We actually went down after all of it and brought giant pots of spaghetti, and we're feeding workers there, because if you go along Main Street in Owego, all those beautiful antique houses, they just had to tear out all the wood and stuff, and they're just all along the streets were just flooring and furniture and all this stuff of all these houses that was flooded. But it just struck me to see mud lines on the top of trees. I'm like, how did the water even get up there? It was just hard to comprehend. And that's the picture this is trying to give you. The blood is so deep from the slaughter, it's going to reach the top of mountains. And there's going to be corpses just everywhere, right? Corpses thrown out. What Christians do is Christians bury. Christians were known for the burying of corpses, not the desecration of corpses. Because in the Old Testament it says, cursed is anyone that hangs on a tree. You don't leave someone out to die. You bury them with dignity. Remember? So that's what Christianity handed to the world, of this idea of honoring corpses, where here it says they're just going to be strewn all over the place. Now this is an image that comes from God's word already, the Torah. The desecration of corpses was promised for those who broke God's covenant in the Torah. That is the first 5 books of Moses. Leviticus 26:30 gives us this picture, a very similar picture here in Isaiah, when it says this. I will destroy your high places. I will cut down your incense altars. Those were false worship. And cast your carcasses on the lifeless forms of your idols, and my soul shall abhor you. That's what God said to Israel. If you will not follow me, if you'll worship all these other gods, all the sacrifices you make, including, they would do child sacrifices, he says, I'm going to pile them up around your idols, and that's what it's going to look like. Well, that's why Isaiah here in chapter 34 uses this image of piling up corpses, because he's saying, Israel, guess what? You are now facing what God said would happen in Leviticus. Isaiah isn't just pulling out of thin air the idea of corpses. He's saying, this is what God promised back in Leviticus. And the same thing is promised there in the book of Numbers. We won't go to those passages. Now look at verse 5. All of a sudden you have this shift. Remember, we were talking about all the nations, and look at what verse 5 says. For my sword shall be bathed in heaven. Indeed, it shall come down on Edom, and on the people of my curse for judgment. The sword is filled with blood. It's made overflowing with fatness. With the blood of lambs and goats, with the fat of the kidneys of rams. For the Lord has a sacrifice in Bozrah. Okay. Bozrah is the city that is the capital of Edom, right? Why is God singling out Edom here? Well, Edom is being singled out because they were close relatives of Israel, but they were always fighting with Israel. They were kind of cousins with Israel. Do you remember who Edom actually is? That's the name of Esau, right? And so remember, who was Esau but Jacob's brother? All the Israelites come from the guy named Israel, Jacob. The Edomites come from the guy named Edom, Esau. So these are people who ought to be close with Israel, who ought to be their ally. Yet throughout history in the Bible, over and over, Edom was a thorn in the side of Israel. And they're literally in the side of Israel. If you can picture a map of Israel, Edom would be like down here. So Israel's kind of in this area. Edom is like southeast of Israel. And in fact, in this southeast location, after the book of Isaiah is written, and Isaiah knows this, I think this is why he's singling Edom out, because he knows 586 BC, Nebuchadnezzar is going to come through Edom into Israel. He's going to take captive all these Israelites. He's going to drag them throughout the desert, put them on chains, and bring them back to Babylon. And he's going to march them right through Edom. And you know what Edom's going to do as the Israelites are marched through, strung along on a chain? Edom's going to stand by like it's a parade and clap. And that's what the book of Obadiah is all about. A judgment coming to Edom because they clapped as they were taken away to Babylon. So God picks Edom because they just kind of exemplify the idea of violent people who ought to know better but who do not. Okay? So Edom is singled out because they were close relatives of Israel, but they're always fighting with Israel. Again, this whole chapter is about God judging the world, but he says, let me just pick out one group from the world and show them off as a picture of my judgment that's coming. Right? In the same way that God takes the whole world and gives grace to the world and picks out the little nation of Israel and says, I want to show Israel off as my vessel of grace. God is in the business of doing that, of kind of choosing one to represent a whole group. God has done this throughout history, right? So Edom is singled out here. So once again, from history, Isaiah gets his imagery, right? Now, verse 5 also contains an interesting word, and your translations might say different things. My New King Translation says this: "For my sword will be bathed in heaven, indeed it shall come down on Edom, and the people of my curse for judgment."